Good day, everyone. My name is Rebecca Lilly with the International Association for Energy Economics. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar entitled IAEE Youth Debate on Wholesale Electricity Markets. We are grateful to our distinguished speakers for today's timely discussion. First, a little bit about the International Association for Energy Economics. We are the largest association association for specializing in the field of energy economics and provide a forum for the exchange of ideas, experience, and issues among professionals interested in the field. The organization produces 2 professional journals, a newsletter, and holds conferences and virtual presentations along with a host of other products and services you can find at our website, www.iaee.org. If you're not already a member of the association, we welcome you to join. A few housekeeping matters in regards to today's webinar before I hand things over to our moderator. First, this webinar is being recorded for those that cannot participate in today's live event. If you have questions for the panelists, please click the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom window and type your question. We've allocated time at the end of the webinar to read and answer them. And now I would like to introduce you to one of our amazing youth ambassadors, Ashwitha Tunga. Ashwitha, over to you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Good morning, good day, and good evening to all of those who have joined us today. My name is Ashwitha. I work as a research associate with FSR Global. I'm also a youth ambassador. Let me give a brief intro on what the youth ambassador does before we jump into the debate details. So the youth ambassadors are IAEE's digitally empowered communication officers who help spread the knowledge of IAEE community globally, including spreading awareness on the IAEE local affiliates. So the IAEE youth ambassadors are involved in activities such as social media outreach, debates, podcasts, etc. So under this very youth ambassador events initiative, we are here today hosting our very first debate as a part of the IAEE Youth Debate series on the topic of wholesale electricity markets. So various world economies are undergoing energy transitions, which are driven by ambitions to achieve energy access or strengthen the energy security and the environmental conditions, depending on the internal priorities and challenges. So this decentralization and the penetration of renewables brings in unique challenges in the planning and reliable operation of power systems, which in turn influences the outcome of electricity markets. This complex energy transitions requires not just technical, but also economic and regulatory knowledge to design the ever-evolving trade markets. Therefore, and also moreover, due to the recent energy crisis, as well as the soaring commodity prices, the spotlight is back on wholesale electricity markets. So this market design is key in enabling necessary investments for adequacy, giving the right incentives, all in all, making electricity access universal and affordable for everyone. Therefore, how do we design or conceptualize the wholesale electricity markets for tomorrow? To discuss that, we have 3 distinguished experts here with us today who will share their experiences and expertise in electricity market design. To begin with, Tim Schittekatte. I hope I got it right, Tim. Tim is a research scientist at the MIT Energy Initiative, where he conducts research about the power market design and regulation. Tim graduated as an engineer from the Ghent University. He also holds international masters in economics. He holds a PhD in energy economics from University of Paris. Tim was a visiting researcher at the Grid Integration Group of the Lawrence Berkeley National Lab and a junior economist at the Microeconomics in Paris. He was also a research fellow at the Florence School of Regulation, where he continues as a part-time assistant professor. So a very warm welcome to you, Tim. Next is Jacob Mays, is an assistant professor at the School of Civil and Environmental Engineering at the Cornell University. His research focuses on the design and analysis of electricity markets. He's interested in applications of stochastic optimization and statistical learning in energy systems as well. He holds a bachelor's in chemistry and physics from the Harvard University, a master's from energy and systems from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and a PhD in industrial Engineering and Management Sciences from Northwestern University. He's also worked as a management consultant, primarily in the aviation and rail industries, and at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So a very warm welcome to you as well, Jacob. Thank you for joining us in today. And our final speaker is Atul, Dr. Atul Agrawal, who is an academic officer at the Indian Institute of Management, Sirmaur in India. Atul is an energy professional focused on regulatory and policy frameworks in the power sector. He also holds a PhD in power management. He's an active researcher, publishing various publications across various journals and conferences. He's also been associated with the Central Electricity Regulatory Commissions in the past, where he played a key role in drafting orders for the real-time market, green term ahead market, integrated day-ahead market, and forward contracts, as well as drafting the power market regulations and power trading regulations. So extending a warm welcome to you too, Atul. Finally, a little bit about our moderator for today, Etienne Borocco. Etienne is a wholesale markets analyst at the National Regulatory Authority of Energy Markets in France. His main job is to enforce European regulation on the wholesale energy market integrity and transparency to prevent market misuses such as market manipulation or insider trading. He also holds a PhD from the Paris Dauphine University. Apart from that, Etienne is also one of our most active youth ambassadors. It's because of him today that our youth debate series has kickstarted. So welcome to you as well, Etienne. Last but not the least, whom I always call one of the godfathers of the electricity market design, Professor Jean-Michel Glachon. He's not he's not able to join us here for this session today, unfortunately. But however, he sends us his regards. So instead, we have Swetha Ravi Kumar. She's the head of Florence School of Regulation Global, and she's also the vice president of the IAEE. And Swetha's been a very staunch supporter for us youth ambassadors, right from the inception to the onset to organizing various events, so including this one itself. So Swetha, welcome to you as well. That was a brief introduction of all the panelists here today. Without further ado, I think I'll just I'll give you a brief, so the format of the debate will be as follows. So each speaker will speak for 10 minutes, give a brief presentation, followed by a discussion moderated by Etienne. If you have questions, like Rebecca mentioned, please put them in the Q&A box. We'll try to address them as well. And then finally, we'll conclude with the conclusion remarks. So without further ado, Jacob, I invite you to take over the floor, or rather the screen, and begin your presentation. Thanks.
Okay, so I should be sharing if that worked well. Does that look right?
It does.
Okay, great. So thank you. Thank you to the organizers for the invitation. This was obviously a fun topic for me, and I'm excited for the conversation about how these issues play out in markets across the world. So looking forward to it. So I thought what I would do in my time is just kind of give a brief rundown of some of the issues that I think are playing out in various different ways across the world. And I've cribbed a lot of this from Frank Woloch's essay in the Handbook on Electricity Markets, which came out a couple of years ago. But as a brief summary, number one is, can we produce spot prices for electricity or short-term prices that are sufficiently reflective of grid realities? Number two is ensuring conditions for long-term resource adequacy that are consistent with those short-term prices. Number three is around mitigating market power. Number four is on engaging the demand side. And those are kind of the four that Frank Woloch covers in more depth in his essay. And then the fifth that I'm adding is coordinating between generation and transmission expansion, which I think has been a particular challenge in the liberalized markets. So I want to say a little bit more about these three in particular, since I've spent more time working in these. So the basic observation here everybody's familiar with is that wind and solar and moving to extremely high levels of wind and solar means we need more flexible resources to come from somewhere. So as kind of indicative of this, I chose a chart of California's duck curve where this is from Brian Bartholomew, who you might recognize some of his charts. They're always great. But he's taking the minimum net load day each year in California over the last 8 years. And you can kind of see that it's growing down in the middle of the day. And we just reached this spring, the point where the net load on the system was actually negative. So obviously that didn't mean that solar was satisfying all of the load because there was gas plants subject to minimum operating levels and things like that getting in the way of this. But we've gotten to a point where the solar is really pushing out the traditional generation in the middle of the day. So we have these issues with the minimum operating levels, and then we have this huge ramp into the evening peak where all of the other resources in the system need to ramp up quite quickly to meet the evening peak. So that's creating a lot of interesting issues in short-term price formation. The general observation worldwide is that wholesale markets suppress both temporal and locational volatility of energy prices in various ways relative to what you might consider first best kind of economic ideal that would show up in a textbook analysis. Existing price formation also kind of presupposes certain things about the system security. So we just kind of presuppose that there's enough inertia, there's enough reactive power, there's enough system strength, and don't fully get those into the price formation. And the basic observation is that the more wind and solar you have on the system, the more existing flaws in price formation will be exposed. And so there's I think a whole lot of questions around how do we form short-term prices that are kind of sufficiently reflective of the various grid realities, temporal and locational. And then the last point on here is that to the extent that we're not able to produce full strength prices for energy, that implies a need for second best mechanisms of some kind as a proxy for the value being delivered to the grid by resources through these other services. Second bullet I want to talk about is an investment risk. So this is an analysis of ERCOT done by the Brattle Group, where they say if we have a near efficient reserve margin, which in ERCOT and their analysis was around this 10% level, the distribution of revenues seen by marginal entrants into that market are quite heavily skewed, where in the average year, they need to be getting this red line to break even in a zero profit kind of competitive equilibrium type of setting. But in the median year, they're making half that about. So this is a distribution with pretty heavily heavy positive skewness. So they're really counting on these 95th percentile, 90th percentile type of results to recover their investment costs. And so this type of volatility shows up in pretty much every electricity market that doesn't have a whole lot of reservoir hydro, because that there's just kind of the fundamentals of a product where there's not a lot of flexibility on the demand side, and we get into stressful situations where the value of electricity is extraordinarily high. So the basic problem here is that if you have that much volatility, you need to figure out a way to support long-term financing in the entrance into that market. I suspect that Tim will talk more about that in the context of the volatility that's been hitting Europe in particular. But generically, I think that holds across most of the markets in the world. There's at least a potential that growth in wind and solar increases the interannual revenue volatility. And so that will increase either risk premia or increase the demands on the financial markets or the capacity mechanisms or whatever it is that's providing that long-term certainty. Existing mechanisms, I think what we've seen in the last couple of years don't seem to be fully adequate, either with the present mix or for a low carbon future mix. So a lot of work to be done in terms of landing on something that's gonna work well from an economic standpoint and a political standpoint in terms of the long-term financing. The last point I'm going to talk about is the generation transmission coordination issue. The basic structure of the liberalized electricity markets is we have private investors making the generation decisions and primarily central planners doing the transmission planning. And so there's potential for lack of coordination between those two or those two sides of two aspects of the market or the agents in the market. And that's certainly playing out in the US, but I think worldwide there's been issues with transmission generation coordination, where I've chosen here a map of the wind resource of the US to illustrate the fact that it's really windy in the center of the country. We have really great wind resources across the Great Plains, but the population centers tend to be along the coasts. There are larger population centers closer to the wind areas, but the point holds that we need a lot of transmission. We need to coordinate the expansion of wind and solar, and for that matter, other resources with that transmission, and that process leaves a lot to be desired at present. So a lot of modeling studies have suggested that expansion of transmission would be beneficial across cost, reliability, and emissions. So really all three aspects of the classic trilemma. The planning problem is a challenge even in the simplest setting, where you have a single planner trying to figure out what to build. But then when you move to a situation with many decision makers with competing objectives, questionable or poor incentives, it's a very, very thorny problem with lots of room for new ideas and improvement. So I'll close with that and hand the floor, I think, to Tim.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me. I'm gonna put up my slides. Okay, so I'm gonna talk about the EU energy crisis and calls for electricity market reform, which has been a major shock, which has questioned some of the fundamentals of how power markets are designed. And I think also the lessons learned, or the lessons that are being learned, because we are not out of the water yet, are useful for other parts of the globe. So what has happened in the EU energy crisis? So the main source of all this price rises has been a gas price crisis. But those very high gas prices, as you can see here on the upper graph, this is the TTF, which is the classic index that you follow if you look at gas prices in Europe as a whole. It's a sort of proxy. These have been contaminating or impacting very strongly also power prices. That's what you see on the lower side graph. Those are the monthly averaged day-ahead prices. So those are prices that are computed every day per hour for the next day. But you can see that these very closely follow the pattern of the gas prices, and that those ones have also been rising from normal levels of around 40 euro per megawatt hour up to monthly averages nearing 400, 500, which is like multiplied by 10, which is massive. So this was around the summer of 2021 when it was clear that something was off. Gas storages were not necessarily being filled. You saw the slow slope in the rise of those gas prices. Then this is where the Ukraine invasion happens. So surprisingly, it's not the biggest peak. The biggest peak actually comes after, when there was the most, I would say, most worry that we wouldn't have enough gas for the next summer. So that was August, end of August last year. And why do these power prices follow these gas prices so closely? It's because at least in the spot markets, power spot markets, prices are set based on a marginal pricing rule, and often the marginal unit has been the gas unit. So the marginal cost of the marginal unit increases, which basically means that, as you can see, prices increase. And it's for politicians very hard to understand that even though about 30–40% of electricity is generated by gas in the EU as a whole, that means that the prices for every unit actually increase and that consumers have to pay those prices. But this is, of course, a very incomplete statement because not everybody pays these spot prices. People have longer-term contracts, generators have longer-term contracts, but this was kind of the power price series that were making the headlines in the news and created all kind of, I would say, political reaction to the way that power markets are designed. So what has been the consequence of that? A few weeks or months of high prices are a problem, but not that bad. But if you have very high prices for a year and a half, almost 2 years, you get affordability issues. And you can see it here already on these tweets from Jean-Michel, who couldn't make it today, but I saw him actually an hour ago, that the average consumer or the median consumer in UK suddenly became energy poor. And there has also been impacts on industry, meaning that it became very expensive for energy intensive companies who had to shut down their plants or maybe even think about relocating, which has an impact on jobs and GDP and also, so it's a really, really bad situation. So what have governments been doing? They have been spending a lot of public money in order to mitigate these affordability concerns for industry and consumers. Some countries have more, I would say, flexible public budgets than others, but we're talking here about several percentage points of GDP that has been used to mitigate those issues. Especially Germany has been spending a lot of money. Some of that money has been, I would say, recuperated, if you want, from sort of interventions into the power market, but definitely not all of it. This is not a sort of revenue neutral kind of mitigation scheme. Unfortunately, it's very hard to sort of intervene into the gas market because that gas producers, which was first Russia, but then the US played an important role. They're often extra EU, they're outside of the EU, and you cannot really tax them that much because otherwise they would send their LNG ships somewhere else. So therefore, people had to look into the power market and intervene. So what has been the reaction of the European Commission is that they have published in March a sort of a proposal for a revision of the electricity market design. In a recent paper, we have commented on that proposal. We focused on 4 different things. I won't cover all of them, but we think the most important parts are kind of a more stabilized framework of the promotion of long-term contracts. They also put a sort of framework on when interventions could happen in a sort of price crisis, and they also define in a quite vague way what a price crisis is. They also cover more regulation around suppliers or retailers, because many retailers went bankrupt in the crisis, and that has not been good. And also the 4th point is where they talk a lot about fostering investment into flexibility. And what they mean by that is mostly demand response and storage. Even though I think that if you have a lot of demand response and storage within this current crisis or the past couple of years, it wouldn't have changed the situation that much. But I think they do use this momentum of a sort of redesigning the markets to push certain policies, which will be very important, I would say, post 2030, post 2028, when there's even more renewables. So I would decouple this from the crisis, but they use that political momentum to stimulate those investments. I think the good thing of the proposal is that basically they went with the right side of this, I would say, 2 polar visions on what to do with spot markets. So there has been a lot of discussion on, okay, marginal pricing in this system. How is it possible that one unit or one generation source has increased cost and therefore the price for all rises? Shouldn't we split the market? Shouldn't we blow up the market? This has not been something that has been only discussed in the EU, also in the UK and even in the US. Recently, there was a FER commissioner who questions that marginal pricing, or at least to some respect, is that still fit, especially when you think about the future where we have more and more renewables coming in, so even more volatility in those spot markets. But if you read this other paper from Professor Hogan, what he says is that the spot market will even be more important in the future with more renewables, because how otherwise you're going to coordinate storage, demand, supply, and networks. So I would advise everybody to read that paper. But the real problem in the crisis has been the spot market is great to coordinate, to dispatch resources, to coordinate trade, but it's not very good if your business case depends on it or your final bill as a consumer. So there has been too much of a financial reliance on the spot market and not enough long-term contracting. And that is also what the Commission realizes. So basically what these guys are saying here, even though they're very different personas, is the same thing, that you need a sort of additional layer of regulation on top of those spot markets, because it seems that that long-term contracting, and Jacob mentioned also the idea of hedging risk for new investments, it seemed that it doesn't come out of nowhere. It's not necessarily something that naturally is enabled by these markets. And this has always been a massive dispute, like, do we go energy only or do we go energy plus capacity markets and all kind of other procurement schemes? Well, in the European context, it seems that right now the consensus is really that we go to what they call sort of hybrid markets, where you have a well-functioning spot markets, competition within the market, but all kind of mechanisms around it, competition for the market when you do new kind of investments. So necessarily the spot market that being used as the only signal to generate investment has been somehow abandoned in this crisis. I think that would be one of my major lessons learned. One of the big discussions in that about these long-term contracts is, what do we use for these new renewables? They'll need long-term contracts because the risk is massive. Do we rely on like sort of bilateral PPA contracting? You see here the statistics of how much PPAs have been closed in the EU. These numbers are not that high yet. Or do we rely on governments to auction off CFDs, contracts for differences, and as such sort of more government-led planning and auctions for these new renewables to come in? Here you see the numbers of the UK auctions. And this is really a bit of the big discussion, like, do we rely, it's always like you need both, but what it will be here, what will support the most, these PPAs, or we're gonna have a more stronger government-driven. In the US, it's more the PPA approach, because this sort of government support, which used to be support, has always been tax credits, which is something very different. And then almost my last slide is what is also clear is that capacity markets will become more important. Here you can see a graphs or figures from capacity markets in Europe, in the US, and in Latin America. What you can see, it's just increasing the amount of jurisdictions where you have capacity mechanisms. And unfortunately, there's a lot of colors on this graph, which means that on these figures, which means that in many parts of the world, they're actually implementing capacity markets in different ways. And as Jacob has already been saying, it's very important to get this right. So I assume there's a lot of research to be done on, okay, we might accept that we need a sort of capacity mechanism, how we will design it, how it will interact with long-term contracting for renewables, how it will interact with other kind of tools. The most important thing is that the contracts that are designed there, they're compatible with the spot market, and at least you will operate your resources in real time optimally. My last point is that, will we have enough with having renewable plans and long-term contracts, capacity markets, for a next shock? Because it is possible that in the next couple of years, there is again a sort of price shock in Europe or somewhere else. And my thoughts are here on the slide is that we have a pace of new long-term contracts coming in, which, if the government is the counterparty, they have a sort of intrinsic hedge. But at the same time, right now, or in 2020, about 40% of generation was still hydro plants and nuclear. And Sarah has calculated that if we continue on the pace of these CFDs, government-led, that it will take about 15 years to have 50% of generation under those long-term contracts. At the same time, the value of renewables, the weighted average capture price of renewables, starts diverging from the consumer weighted average price, because when a lot of renewables are producing, the price will be low, and that moment will not necessarily be the moment when a lot of consumers are consuming. Think about the duck curve. You will consume a lot at the peak, maybe not as much during the belly. And therefore, the value of 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy is not necessarily the cost of 1 megawatt hour that you buy as a consumer. So the European Commission has been strongly thinking of permanently regulating in some way or another existing renewables, hydro, and nuclear in order to protect themselves against the price shock, because it's such an important part of generation. I don't think that's the ideal route. Unfortunately, consumers, they have shown for a long time not willing to come in to engage into hedging for longer term. There has many reasons. Maybe they're uninformed. Maybe it's not possible. Transaction costs are high. Maybe they just expect that the government will help them out the moment you have a crisis, which is basically what has been happened. So therefore, there's not enough willingness from demand to go into these hedges. But at the same time, when there is a price shock, there is such a political momentum that you can have intervention. So therefore, there is a rationale to, on top of all these mechanisms, have a sort of bill insurance scheme or something in order to be protecting at least the more vulnerable consumers for a next price shock, if that would happen. So that's where I would end my intervention. Thank you very much. I think it's over to Atul now.
Yeah, thank you. So namaste one and all. Today, quickly, I'll try to put a glimpse on the wholesale electricity market in India and its design. I'll inter alia discuss the issues which we have addressed and also the issues which we intend to address. So let's first understand what motivated the development of wholesale market in India. Electricity in India, it is a concurrent subject. Initially, most of the power used to be scheduled at state level only in silos. Sellers and buyers across the country were not visible to each other at a single platform. Therefore, the economic dispatch of power was not there, and hence optimality of power purchase cost was in question. Due to this invisibility issue, sometimes the available power was not being matched with the demand available. Repercussions were the load shedding at the demand side and creation of unrequisitioned surplus or URS at generating side, which further impacted the plant load factor. Sometimes it also used to happen that URS in power plant is there and you can offset a set of demand at marginal cost, but that URS is remaining unutilized, and for that set of demand you are running another power plant at technical minimum. So inefficiency was there. Again, it was invisibility issue. Moreover, prices were not the function of demand and supply. There was nothing to provide price signals. Most of the times prices used to be decided through head-to-head conversations, and for remaining quantum, banking arrangements between discoms were being practiced. In order to address this particular situation, the Commission of Electricity, through its suo motu petition, started working on development of power market in India. They introduced power exchanges in 2008. Gradually,
sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing slides? Because we don't see any.
okay. Are they not visible?
No, we don't see your slides yet.
Is it okay now?
Right, we see it now. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah. Then in 2003, introduction of Electricity Act foreseen the development of power market in India, and with the surplus of power in some of the time blocks, trading of power has started. Initially, it was through electricity traders and then through the electricity exchanges. The Act further mandated universal supply obligation for all the discoms, which means discoms were obliged to provide 24/7 power, and hence for the residual demand, they started coming at power exchanges. To facilitate this all, the transmission capacity was developed rapidly and open access was allowed. Earlier, so we have 5 regions in India. So different regions were not integrated with each other. They were integrated subsequently, and we achieved one nation, one grid, one frequency status. Furthermore, for promoting renewable energy, each of the DISCOM and large consumers were obligated to purchase renewable energy. As some of the states were not rich in the renewable energy, they started coming at power exchanges for fulfilling this renewable purchase obligation and started purchasing renewable energy certificates. One REC being equivalent to 1 megawatt hour of renewable energy generated and divided into solar and non-solar certificates. These certificates used to be issued to RE generators and then through exchanges used to be traded, and who were the buyers? The obligated entities. Apart from trading of electricity and RE certificates for energy efficiency were also introduced. Physical delivery based RE contracts apart from certificates and ancillary contracts were also recently launched at power exchanges. We will discuss them in the coming slides. So the evolution of wholesale market in India, it may be considered with the establishment of first trading company in 1999 as a joint venture of big players, NTPC, NHPC, Power Grid and PFC. They actually started trading operation in 2001. However, till that time, no particular legislation was especially covering the power trading, right? So Electricity Act 2003 then filled this particular gap, defined trading as a licensed activity and also recommended development of power exchanges in India under the section 66. So in line with the objectives of Electricity Act, the Central Commission, after having stakeholder consultation, notified regulatory order for the power exchanges. And then in 2008, we have seen establishment of two power exchanges, IEX and PXIL. And then for protecting the interest of stakeholders, we have notified a specific set of regulation, power market regulation in 2010 and power trading regulation also in 2010. Recently, very recently in 2020 and 2021, we have replaced those regulations with new set of regulation, power market regulation 2021 and power trading regulation 2020. We have also notified a framework on OTC platform, right? On OTC platform, and the most discussed change which has been proposed by the PMR 2021 is the market coupling within the country. Okay, so definitely we will discuss that. And then in 2020 we have seen the establishment of most demanded third power exchange in India. So before 2003, the state electricity boards, they were vertically integrated, they were having vertically integrated generation, transmission and distribution. And then subsequent to the unbundling, which was recommended by the Electricity Act only, we have seen a single buyer model. Most of the states, they opted the integrated version of single buyer model. After establishing power exchanges in 2008, the wholesale marketplace can be said that it has been developed. We achieved adequate installed capacity for generation and transmission as visioned by the Electricity Act 2003 with high competition level, and also provided choice to large consumers who are having connected load of 1 megawatt each. Okay. But since electricity is a concurrent subject in some of the states, this open access capacity has been relaxed to 0.1 megawatt. We have also notified open access for renewable energy trading, and for pan-India, for renewable energy trading, open access is allowed at 0.1 megawatt only. The retail competition model, it is now proposed by the amendments in Electricity Act. This model will give choice to all category of consumers and will bring in competition and efficiency on distribution side or on supply side as well. So what was the timeline of introducing contracts at power exchanges? It actually started with day-ahead market in 2008, and then in later years, we introduced different contracts under the category of term ahead market for the delivery of next day onwards. Okay, so earlier delivery was available till 7 days in advance. Okay. And day-ahead market, yes, it introduced as an hourly contract. However, as of now, it is a 15-minute contract. Subsequently, we also introduced contracts to trade renewable energy. Therein, trading takes place in a sequential manner, like any unclear. So first we clear renewable energy, and any uncleared bid for renewable energy can be transferred to the conventional market, conventional day-ahead market. We also introduced real-time market to trade on real-time horizon to lessen the burden on deviation settlement mechanism. The spot contracts, day-ahead market and real-time market followed double-sided closed bidding auction with social welfare maximization, while other contracts like term ahead market, intraday, weekly, day-ahead contingency, etc., they either follow continuous trading mechanism or uniform price step auction. We are in talks to introduce derivatives in electricity under the purview of SEBI. Before that, we have introduced forward contracts with the permitted delivery of up to 3 months in advance. We have also introduced ancillary contracts at power exchanges, which will catch the pace very soon. Just to give a glimpse, our installed capacity is near to 418 gigawatts. Out of the generated electricity, only 7% is being traded through power exchanges. However, this share can be increased if market-based economic dispatch or pool model is adopted. To facilitate this increment, we have been advising states not to sign a fresh long-term power purchase agreement, especially with the thermal power plants. We are also looking for market coupling, as I said in my first slide. See, we are having 3 power exchanges. Each of the power exchange gives its own price, market clearing price. So we are not having a common price, which gives a price signal to the forward market or to the derivative, which can give the price signal to the derivative market if they are introduced, and also to the deviation settlement mechanism, which is a function of the price of day-ahead market, right? So we are thinking to couple all of the existing exchanges, okay, so that the closed bidding auction can take place with the market coupling operator, and probably if it takes place, if it is notified, India will be the only country in the world who will introduce market coupling within the country and among its power exchanges.
Atul, sorry to interrupt again. You're a bit over time. If you could wrap up.
Yeah, I'm
so
just
make a discussion.
Give me 2 minutes. I am just finishing.
Yeah,
okay, market coupling. Yeah, market coupling will change existing mechanism of bid clearing. All the power exchanges will need to transfer the collected bids to the market coupling operator. And then we have also notified a framework for OTC platform. So as of now, we are having this particular market structure, but what we foresee is this particular market structure where we can have a market coupling, where we can have forward contracts, where we can have derivative in electricity, and also the most of the power which is being generated in India can be traded through power exchanges, through market-based economic dispatch, so that inefficiency and optimality can be removed from the market. Thank you so much.
So thank you everyone for your really interesting presentation. So I would have a bunch of questions for you. First, I would like to ask Jacob about the feature of batteries, maybe in California, for example. So how do you think it could solve the curve, and what would be the issue for the long-term contracting for these batteries?
Thanks. So there's certainly a lot of growth in batteries in California for exactly the reasons you say. They have so much solar, and the obvious counterpart is batteries. The other factor in California being that it's very difficult to build a new gas plant given the 100% clean targets that exist in the state of California. So really the next kind of marginal entrant in terms of a reliability resource is a battery. It's no longer gas in California. So I think there's a lot of questions around how those batteries are dispatched in a system optimal way, especially given the price suppression in California market. So if you look at the case last September, they started dispatching the storage way too early, even though they were getting into a scarcity event. And the reason stems down to market power mitigation and inefficient spot price formation, and that back propagating into inefficient storage offers and inefficient storage dispatch. So I think there's a lot of questions that California has to figure out about how are they going to operate those storage resources in a system optimal way, given the poor short-term price formation that they currently employ in scarcity situations. In terms of long-term contracting, California has made it a little bit easier by just mandating that people sign contracts with storage. But I think in a more general setting, where there isn't that kind of state mandate, there's a lot of interesting questions about what form of contract is going to be well suited to supporting deployment of storage. And I think the people in the market, and if you look at developers in Texas and elsewhere, are kind of still hashing out exactly what that contract form looks like, given that it's not quite the same as a long-term PPA that a renewables producer would sign. It's not quite the same as a capacity contract. So getting those contract forms to be more consistent is I think something that's a work in progress outside of California. So that's at least a partial answer to your question of what's the future of batteries in California.
Okay, thank you very much, Jacob. I have a very interesting questions from Arthur Lynch in the chat. So I'm gonna read his question because so the audience can read. After the clean packages and law recently passed or currently discussed in the US and the EU, such as the IRA, the NZIA and such, what will be the role of electricity market design reforms in the competition towards net zero economies? Moreover, China has also not been mentioned today. Is there any Chinese market practices that would be useful to strengthen investment in low carbon generation in the West? So I don't know who will answer to the question. Tim, go ahead.
I mean, it's a very hard question, but I'll do my best. So there's a massive push for, investment into clean tech. That's what the IRA is about, and that's what the Net Zero Industrial Act is about in the EU. So there's gonna be a massive push for renewables, even more than already today in both continents, and there will be a massive push for electrification. So I think how that relates to electricity market reform is I think you'll get the investment because they're just gonna throw money at you. But if you don't have your markets right, then it's gonna be a lot more costly than it should be. And you might create some security issues if you really make certain resources numb for the actual physics in real time that the power system is subject to. So I see those two risks. But I think the major blocking point could be what really blocks this sort of net zero is electricity grids. Because if you don't have grids, then you can throw as much money to invest in EVs or invest in solar and wind as you want, you just don't get them connected. And this is the coordination, transmission, and even distribution with markets where I see that as a true bottleneck. The market design itself, as I said, is more something that would make it more costly and maybe more tricky from an operational perspective. And about the Chinese market, I don't know.
Okay. Or does Jacob or Atul wants to add something to these questions? Okay.
I would just echo the transmission is the major issue. So you can subsidize all the generation that you want, but I don't think that the Inflation Reduction Act is going to have the impact it wants to have without simultaneous thought on the transmission side. And then like Tim said, the integrating these subsidized resources into the markets in a semi-efficient way is obviously going to be important for maintaining some amount of efficiency and a reliable system. So I'm not really adding anything, but I can't speak a whole lot to the Chinese market developments.
But I would also say distribution, because a lot is going to happen at distribution. If your feeders are full and you want EVs and heat pumps, it's just not gonna happen. The
electric vehicles on the end, as well as heat pumps on the distribution level. I guess the other aspect of the IRA that Lawrence mentioned is hydrogen, where the amount of I've gotten varying opinions on this, but the amount of money being thrown at hydrogen is pretty substantial. And so if that becomes a major player, that has pretty big implications for the demand side. Hopefully the hydrogen producers would be reacting to market signals in a way that would be more efficient and support efficiency in the overall system as well.
Okay, so we're alas, we are coming at the end of this very interesting webinar. So I would say a few words to conclude the debate. First, we saw with the presentation of Atul how it's really complicated and tricky to build a market designed from scratch and to make this transition from monopoly to the wholesale market and enabling the participation of independent power producer. And with the presentation of Jacob, really saw the hurdles, for example, with the duck curve in California, and so how we are going to manage to get this long-term adequacy, and in particular to deal with the transmission issue, because for example, it's not the most windy where people lives, and Tim's made a very good summary of the European crisis. And also, Tim made an important reminding how short-term markets are important, and the dilemma we have for the long-term adequacy financing, because it's very hard to incite people to hedge while there's still the possibility of state intervention, which is a kind of free insurance. So thank you, everyone. And now I'm letting Swetha giving some words to end this webinar.
Again, first of all, I would like to thank speakers for an excellent presentation and to officially kickstart the youth series that we have within IAEE. So congratulations on that. So for those of you who are aware, or for others who are interested to participate, so the youth series, which is one of the format that you're currently in, which is the debates. We also have the podcasts. We also have going to start off some live Twitter engagements. The idea is to sort of bring to light some of the young experts from around the world, and also to sort of help facilitate dialogues among different geographies. As we have seen from today's case, it's not the same kind of transition that's happening in different parts of the world. There are so many things that we could learn from the different regions, what to do and what not to do even. And I think it would be really nice for us to engage with fellow experts and younger experts to sort of exchange this knowledge. IAEE has a lot of the energy gurus as we have been successfully undertaking a lot of different initiatives, but we thought we should start shining light on the younger force. And so thanks Jacob, Tim and Atul for kickstarting this officially. And of course, what we would like to invite from the audience is, if you like the kind of topic that you're hearing today, and if you would like to suggest some topics going forward for be it debates or podcasts that you would like to listen from fellow peer experts, then we would be very much open to listening to your suggestions. So you can hit us up on Twitter or on LinkedIn and make those suggestions. But for now, I think I'll give the floor back to Ashwitha, and thank all of you once again for kickstarting the series in a great way, and looking forward to hearing more of this in different formats. So off to you, Ashwitha.
Yeah, thank you all the speakers again, and thank you, Swetha, for the closing remarks as well. And in case the audience, you have specific questions to any of the speakers or to us, please feel free to reach out to us. As Rebecca mentioned earlier, there will be a live recording on the YouTube channel as well, so you can check it out. Yeah, and again, thank you thanks to all the speakers again for helping us kickstart our first debate. And over to you, Rebecca, in case you wanted to add.
Well, IAEE would also like to add our thanks to all of our outstanding speakers and moderators. This webinar, will be available on IAEE's website for future download. If you're not already a member of IAEE, we welcome you to join by visiting www.iaee.org. We thank you for attending, and I officially close this webinar.